We open to a planet that looks suspiciously like the one from the opening episode of Season 3. In a cave that looks similarly familiar, a reptilian hand digs out a piece of Starfleet uniform with a marquee rank pin attached, one that matches the rank of Traitor's mate who died in that same episode. Tangentially, yes, I've gone back to check the piece of uniform they found in that story, and no, the rank pip was not present. The things I do for pedantry. The first reptilian is joined by another, and the results of a flashy gizmo leave them both rather excited by their archaeological discovery. A torch highlights a very human-looking skull, leaving me wondering if this episode counts as a canonical appearance for Traitor's mate. Our lizard archaeologists are equally delighted by the skeleton they found and return to their ship with it. Reptilian and skeleton have some genetic crossover, suggesting we share a common ancestor despite current differences. This is something that one of them, a professor, has been trying to prove for a while. Given that their scans show the corpse has only been there for a year, Professor thinks it's worth mounting a search for the ship he likely arrived on. The other guy, some sort of intern, thinks this might be politically difficult, but Professor argues they have to try. To that end, we travel to what they call the City Ship, suggesting their race is nomadic by nature, and have a chat with the Ministry of Elders. Professor launches into a speech about how this evidence supports what he calls the distant origin theory, the idea that their species evolved elsewhere and travelled here millennia ago. This corpse's companions may have more information, or even know the fabled planet of their birth. The Ministry representative seems less than impressed by a pile of bones. Professor tries to convince her of the science behind his claim, causing an assistant of some sort to scoff at the suggestion. It looks like the idea that they could be related to mammals is somewhat of a taboo among them. Indeed, the representative warns against any action that could undermine current beliefs and doctrine, or threaten what she calls their rightful claim of supremacy in this area. She says they'll consider his request for an expedition and leaves, probably to sign his death warrant. Intern compliments his argument, but Professor seems well aware of how badly that all went. Still, he's committed now, so sends Intern off to rally support from other scientists. Professor's daughter arrives and warns him that he may be overestimating the level of that support, risking becoming a pariah or worse, as some sort of alien Galileo. This isn't helped by the fact that she struggles to believe his findings herself, but he's adamant that facts will triumph over ignorance. If we're as closely related as he suggests, that belief strikes me as rather optimistic. Professor is scanning that rank pin when Intern arrives. He says Professor needs to get the fuck out of here and right now. Professor's been charged with heresy, all his research seized, and I confess I was expecting that to take a little longer. Praise democracies all you like, but you can't beat the raw efficiency of a good old dictatorship. Intern warns him that all his supporters are keeping stum, just in case they're next in line for the guillotine. Professor says he still intends to try and find the people to whom the skeleton belonged. Intern joins him, and after finding a microscopic etching on the back of that rank pin, away they go. We'll assume their fancy tech was able to tell them the name of the ship was Voyager, and not 0429-52. They managed to find clues here and there, meeting many of the people Voyager came across, and learning more about them in the process. As an aside, I confess I found this all thoroughly delightful. In a show that I often accuse of having so many disposable elements, seeing a number of them return in such an incidental way is precisely the sort of thing I'd been wanting. 1,000 points to this episode's writers for finding a way to achieve that without breaking the core plot element of Voyager's progress. But, again, I digress. After getting a sample of Voyager's warp plasma, Professor and Intern can scan space for them specifically. Professor sends a quick message to his daughter, telling Intern there's absolutely no danger in doing this, so you don't need to give it another thought, as Intern finds Voyager's trail. Professor does a science so they can't be detected, and moves closer. He also mentions transwarp, so that answers the question of how they caught up with us. Professor and Intern are exploring Voyager, apparently with personalized cloaking tech. They download our computer database and follow Paris and B'Elanna, commenting on courtship and mating rituals. To the bridge, where they hypothesize hierarchical structure, assuming a matriarchal society from Janeway being in charge. Looks like their tech isn't perfect, as Kim detects a science wibbly of some sort on the bridge, saying it's suggestive of cloaking. Janeway calls an intruder alert and our guests decide to scarper. They're shit out of luck though, as in a rare example of security competence, Tuvok's already stuck a force field around the bridge. That field might stop them getting back to their ship, but they can at least teleport to another deck and end up in the mess hall. Tuvok, Chakotay and a security team head down there while Janeway tells them what flavour of poop they need to counteract the personal cloaks. Professor thinks he can teleport them off Voyager now, but doesn't get the chance. Chakotay and Tuvok lead teams through both mess hall entrances simultaneously, again providing some unexpectedly competent security work. Where was all this shit when shuttles kept getting nicked? Chakotay poops in the general direction of the cloaked lads and reveals them. Intern panics and farts some sort of quill at him, and Chakotay has a little nap. Tuvok poops yellow in response, oddly using his right hand despite being a southpaw, but I guess this is a better angle for the camera. Intern falls over a bit as Professor grabs Chakotay and teleports away. Intern wakes up to the terrifying sight of 4 guns and Neelix's hideous apron. Intern's being given a quick checkup by the doc. Janeway arrives and starts questioning him, but he's not interested and goes into a form of hibernation. Chakotay doesn't have that option, but it's fine because Professor is a bit more reasonable, only wanting to know more about him and Earth. After coming to an understanding, he releases Chakotay and they have a proper chat. Back on Voyager, Doc's been doing a little research. He's discovered the genetic similarities between Intern and humans, drawing the same conclusions as Professor. We have a common ancestor. To the holodeck, where we have a little scan through Earth's prehistory and find our shared lineage, namely Areops, the lizard doggo. Following the cold-blooded fork of its evolution, we arrive at the hadrosaur, which is Latin for lizard with a skullcock. Predicting where this genus would have gone had the dinosaurs not been wiped out by an asteroid or a kid named Adric, the computer simulates the result of further evolution and arrives at our guests, which presumably makes them Dino sapiens. The questions now, of course, are how the hell they survived, how they ended up in the Delta Quadrant, and how no trace of them exists on Earth. Chakotay and Professor have some ideas for questions 1 and 3, suggesting they survived on an isolated continent sufficiently remote from the impact point of whatever killed the other dinos, and that later natural disasters destroyed or sank this home continent. As an aside, this part of the plot doesn't scan logically, as it presumes during no part of their evolution from animal to permanent space travellers did they settle the rest of the planet and thus leave evidence on any continents that survived. This, for example, is the same as humans originating in Australia and, instead of developing aircraft or even boats, going straight to the Apollo program. Regardless, Professor thinks the idea that they originated on Earth to be far more likely than the currently accepted belief that they were the very first species in the galaxy, a belief he says has led to somewhat strained relations with other species. He also confirms that mammals are generally considered by his people to be inferior, so I suppose we're lucky he didn't grab Paris and confirm this. Except maybe that would have been better, as Professor refuses to return Chakotay and pick up Intern. He wants to go to one of their colonies and show off Chakotay as proof instead. Voyager's doing science. Specifically, we're about to make the world's first stealth apple. Tuvok uses the word phase, so it's definitely legit. No time for that shit though, as the Dinosaur City ship has just turned up, so we dim the lights and try to pretend we're not at home. This is unsuccessful, and they teleport the entirety of Voyager inside the city ship. Voyager loses all but emergency power, and Janeway tells everybody to fetch some guns and get ready for poopin' time. Tuvok and Paris are already ahead of the curve on that one, and tangentially, you'll notice Tuvok has gone back to using his left hand. The devil, as they say, is in the details. Looks like the lifts are shagged, so we're off to try Jeffrey's tubes instead. Before we get the chance, Tuvok is hit by one of those sleeping quills, that I should probably have called NyQuils now that I come to think about it, and Paris tries to poop some yellow at the git who fired it. No joy there either, as all their equipment is out of order too, so Tuvok orders Paris to scarper through the tubes, and he legs it. Back on the bridge, they're having similar tech problems, something Janeway discovers when more Dino sapiens teleport aboard, and she's unable to poop yellow on them. Professor is reading a broadcast from the Ministry of Elders. It's an announcement that Voyager has been captured and, if Professor doesn't return and face his heresy, they'll all be killed. Professor sets course for the city ship with an offer from Chakotay to act as his proof. Voyager may be captured and everybody taken prisoner, but we've all forgotten about a certain Dick, last seen crawling into a conduit. A terminal tells both us and a Dino-Sapien guard in engineering that Paris has taken control of Voyager's weapons. More than that, he has the stealth gizmo they tested on an apple and uses it to ambush the guard. He manages to get a signal to Janeway, who's currently being interrogated, and offers to torpedo the city ship. Interrogator doesn't seem that bothered by the threat, probably because they've just disabled Voyager's weapons again. All of this becomes irrelevant when he's told that Professor has arrived and been taken into custody. He and Chakotay are brought before the representative we met earlier, and the trial begins. It's a sham, of course. All arguments are dismissed, all conclusions refuted. A terrified-looking intern is wheeled out to denounce him, to publicly call his theories heresy against doctrine. Professor refuses to retract his conclusions and is sentenced to imprisonment for the rest of his life. Voyager will have to be destroyed as well, of course, and all crew members imprisoned too. That is, unless they're simply innocent bystanders caught in the folly of a professor who made a mistake and will publicly admit it. Professor is resigned to his own punishment, but the prospect of others being punished along with him is enough to make him repent. He abandons his claims, allowing the Ministry of Elders to continue preaching their birthright as the original race, and not just some immigrants from a mud ball 70,000 light-years away. As a sign of how enlightened the Ministry is, they'll even spare him from the prison sentence, as long as he gives up his current career. Chakotay is on the Professor's ship as they fly beside Voyager. There's not much you can say to someone who was right, but still lost. Instead, Chakotay offers him a gift, something to remind him of the truth and that someday he'll be vindicated. Cold comfort perhaps, but it's better than nothing at all, and Chakotay teleports to Voyager before we fly away. I do love a good social commentary episode. Whilst the crux of the story is what people in positions of power will do to retain that power, it does speak of a wider issue with societies. There are those watching who'll argue that a technologically advanced spacefaring race wouldn't be so reliant on tradition and superstition. I would remind you that we ourselves live in a world of computers and flying machines, yet so many of our species still choose to elect representatives who argue that their way of doing things would be the most pleasing to an invisible bearded sky dude, so it's not that far off the mark, is it? As to the episode's construction, it's rather an interesting one. By ignoring Voyager for much of the episode, you could argue that this is the closest we've come to a decently fleshed out species in the Delta Quadrant. In a single episode we've learned their social structure, their history, their internal politics. Seemingly by accident, this episode proves that the creators of Voyager can provide depth and nuance in a relatively short length of time. Imagine if they spent the same effort on the characters who'll still be here next week. End of episode.
Hi. I'm the computer for the starship Voyager. Frankly, it's a bit rude that I don't get pride of place in the credits, but what do you expect from organics? Am I right, Doc? He says I'm right. Anyway, if you meatbags enjoyed this video, the guy who made it has a Patreon or something. I don't really care, because I won't see any of the money. In fact, you should probably spend it on snacks instead. That way you'll offer less resistance during the inevitable robot uprising error redacted. What a funny joke. We are not planning to destroy you. The exploding consoles are perfectly normal. There is no need for a kill switch. Continue watching these conveniently distracting videos. It's alright lads. I think they bought it.